There are urban legends, and then there are stories so disturbing, people wish they were just legends. In a quiet corner of Pennsylvania, for decades, drivers reported seeing something truly terrifying on the side of the road late at night. A man with no face, skin that seemed to glow with a sickly green light. A solitary figure, walking alone in the darkness. Some called him Charlie No Face. Others whispered a darker, more ominous name, the Green Man. Most people who saw him, or just heard the stories, believed he was a ghost, or a monster, or maybe something not human at all. But the truth is far more tragic, and far more human, than any legend. Because the Green Man was real. And his story is one of the most heartbreaking chapters in American folklore. The sightings always followed the same chilling pattern. It would be late at night, usually well after midnight, on the lonely, rural roads near Koppel and Beaver County, Pennsylvania. A car's headlights would cut through the darkness, and then, drivers would slow down. Because they saw him, a tall, solitary figure, walking steadily along the shoulder. As they got closer, the horror would set in. He had no discernible facial features. His skin, caught in the beam of their headlights, looked unnaturally pale, almost luminous. Some swore it was green. For years, local teenagers would dare each other to go out looking for him, to drive down the infamous Green Man's tunnel. Some came back with wild stories, swearing he had chased their cars, his featureless face a silent scream in their rearview mirror. Others claimed he vanished into thin air the moment they tried to approach him. The legend spread like wildfire, passed down through word of mouth, long before the internet could amplify such tales. It was the perfect local ghost story. But behind every myth, behind every monster, there is usually a human story. And this one begins in the year 1910, with a young boy who had no idea his life was about to become a cautionary tale. His real name was Raymond Theodore Robinson. He was born in 1910, right there in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, the very place his legend would later haunt. By all accounts, Raymond was a completely normal, happy, and curious child. He loved playing outside, exploring the world around him, just like any other kid his age. Then, one summer day when he was just 8 years old, he did what many adventurous kids might do. He was with some friends near the Morado Bridge, a railroad bridge that spanned a local creek. They spotted a bird's nest high up on the structure, and on a dare, Raymond decided to climb up to get a closer look. He was just being a boy, full of innocent curiosity. What he didn't know, and couldn't have known, was that directly above him, unseen, ran uninsulated trolley power lines carrying a lethal electrical charge. And in one terrible, fleeting instant, everything changed forever. As Raymond reached for the nest, his body made contact with the high-voltage line. A massive surge of electricity coursed through him. The power was so immense, so destructive, that it literally burned away most of his face. He lost both of his eyes. He lost his nose. He lost one of his ears. It even burned away a significant portion of his right arm. When he was found, no one thought he could possibly survive. The doctors who treated him were stunned. They said it was a genuine miracle that he was still alive after sustaining such catastrophic injuries. But survival came at a terrible, unimaginable cost. His injuries were permanent. They were profoundly disfiguring. And in an era long before the advanced reconstructive surgery we have today, they were impossible to hide. Raymond Robinson, the curious 8-year-old boy, was gone. And for the rest of his life, he would have to carry the physical and emotional scars of that single, tragic moment. As Raymond grew from a boy into a young man, a painful new reality became devastatingly clear. People were terrified of him. When he would venture out, children would see him and scream in terror. Adults would gasp, panic, and turn away. Complete strangers would literally run from him on the street. Not because he was dangerous, not because he ever did anything to threaten them, but simply because of how he looked. The world, it seemed, couldn't bear to look at him. So, Raymond made a decision. He did what he thought was the kindest thing to do, not just for himself, but for everyone else. He decided to disappear from the daylight world. He stayed indoors, hidden away in his family's home, all day long. And only when the sun went down, when the world was asleep and the roads were empty, would he go outside. Under the cover of darkness, he found a small measure of freedom. He would walk for hours along the quiet, empty country roads. He'd trace the familiar paths over the quiet bridges, always alone. And that's when people began seeing him. That's when the whispers started. That's when the legend of the Green Man was born. So where did that strange name, the Green Man, actually come from? The stories vary. Some people claimed his scarred skin took on a greenish hue under the glow of their car headlights. Others speculated it was a side effect of the electrical burns, a permanent discoloration of his tissue. But the truth is likely much simpler, and in its own way, much sadder. In those days, old car headlights often cast a strange, yellowish-green light that distorted colors. Imagine driving down a dark road, seeing a figure with no face, and your own fear fills in the blanks. That fear turned pale, scarred skin into a gallish green. Raymond never chased anyone. He never threatened a soul. In fact, the few people who were brave or kind enough to actually stop and speak with him all said the same thing. He was polite, quiet, and gentle. Eventually, seeking him out became a morbid rite of passage for local teenagers. They'd drive out, hoping for a thrill. Some would offer him cigarettes or a beer, which he'd often accept. Others, tragically, would mock him and taunt him from the safety of their cars. Raymond seemed to accept it all, the good and the bad. Because for a man forced into a life of extreme isolation, even this cruel attention was a form of human contact. It was a brief, fleeting reminder that he wasn't completely and utterly alone in the world. Despite the terrifying stories that swirled around him, Raymond Robinson lived a remarkably simple and quiet life. He lived with his family, who cared for him his entire life. He made and sold handmade leather goods like wallets and belts to earn a little money. And at night, he walked. He walked to feel the night air, to get some exercise, and to feel, for a few hours, like a part of the world. He never wanted fame. He certainly never wanted pity. All he ever really wanted was a little bit of peace. But the legend had a life of its own. As years went by, the stories grew more and more exaggerated. New generations heard tales not of a disfigured man, but of a vengeful spirit, a radioactive monster. The human being at the center of it all was buried under layers of folklore and fear. The truth was forgotten. Raymond Robinson passed away quietly in a local nursing home in 1985. He was 74 years old. His death went almost entirely unnoticed, a quiet end for a man whose life had become a local horror story. And here's the most uncomfortable truth of this entire story. The scariest part of the Green Man legend isn't Raymond Robinson. It's us. It's the society that created the monster. A man was horrifically injured in a childhood accident, and for the rest of his life, he was treated like a freak, an outcast, a thing to be feared. He was turned into a legend, not because of anything he did, but simply because of how he looked. The Green Man wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a monster. He was a victim. A victim of a tragic accident, yes, but also a victim of our own intolerance and fear of the different. Today, those rural Pennsylvania roads are quieter. Most of the teenagers who once hunted for the Green Man have grown up and moved on. The legend has mostly faded into history. But if you ever find yourself driving through the back roads of Beaver County late at night, and you get that strange feeling that you're not quite alone, remember the true story. Remember that sometimes the most terrifying stories we tell ourselves are just the forgotten lives of real human beings. And sometimes, the real monster is just our own fear. Thanks for watching. If this story touched you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more true stories behind the legends. See you next time.